Hi, my name is Kabun. My family and I have always been quite into the arts. And in the last few years, I've been quite fortunate to be able to revisit this thing that I like. So I've been reading up a lot more and exploring more about the arts. The first Cheong Soo Pieng art piece that caught my eye and which I really liked was a mixed media art piece called Malay Family. The art piece is actually made up of scrap metal and canvas, jute material. I felt that the way that he executed the art piece was quite avant-garde actually for his time. So that day when I left the gallery, I was very interested in the piece and I told Mr. Ho that, I'm really interested and I want to find out more about it. So as I was walking out, he passed me this book. So the idea was that, look, if you're interested in Nanyang art and you're interested in Cheong Soo Pieng, you better read out about him. And this was very beneficial to me. I think that it's important to have a good foundation, and one of the ways is not only to talk to professionals in the art business and to talk to fellow collectors. The other thing is that it's important to read up on the artist, what his life was like. Because to me, the appreciation of the artwork goes beyond the aesthetics and the techniques. I like to learn about what the artist was like as a person, what inspired him, what influenced him, who are the people in his life. And through that, I get to learn about the history and the culture of a place and its people. So it becomes like a social history lesson. Under the banyan tree, because of the usage of ink, it has a very elegant and graceful quality to it, which I really like. I like how Cheong Soo Pieng used ink not on paper but on cloth. It really brings out the visual imagery of the artwork. And the overall effect is very subtle, but it's very definite, and it's very distinctively Cheong Soo Pieng. When I look at Under the Banyan Tree, I think of this photo quite a lot. And he looks very contemplative in this photo. Because Under the Banyan Tree was one of his later ink works, and it was executed during a period of his life when he reached artistic maturation. And for him to be able to reach a stage where he could not rehash on what he had learned, but to innovate and to break new ground and to do it in a very revolutionary way must have been very satisfying to him. And I believe that during his later years, he must have liked that very much.
Hi, I'm Suyan Wong.
And I'm from India. Her father was an art collector, and he inspired us in many ways to get into the type of collecting that we do today. So he had a very keen eye, and he used to teach us a lot about what to look for and what specific things to watch out for.
Well, I guess our focus is really around telling the Singapore story.
Singapore as a country is very young, and when we started, art was not necessarily the first order of priority. There were other priorities, and so very few artists were here. They were trying to capture in their own way, with their own eyes, with their own style and their own technique, this evolution that Singapore had from being fishing villages to becoming the metropolis it is today. That's what we focus on, the artists that help to keep that story.
I personally think Cheong Soo Pieng is fascinating because he was able to span such a broad array of techniques, styles over the course of his career. And when you look at artists, it's always about how are they creating and adding to the body of knowledge, as you would say, right? So for Cheong Soo Pieng, as you watch the progression of his career, whether it was ink paintings, oil paintings, sculpture, mixed media, abstract, he went through the entire spectrum. In that sense, I think he's very unique amongst all the Singapore artists of that era.
One of my favorite Cheong Soo Pieng pieces is the very first piece that we bought, which was a kampong scene. So he did very few of those, and we find that to be exactly what we're looking for. It's an oil painting of a particular era around the 50s when he was still able to see the kampongs and paint what he saw.
So I think one of the things that makes Soo Pieng very innovative was the fact that he retained the old Chinese ink techniques but applied a completely different lens to it. So when you look at the seaside painting, for example, it's abstract, it's very graphic, it's a lot of angles. Some of the other artists who came from China maintained the Chinese style, and they didn't actually innovate as such, whereas Soo Pieng really overlaid color, technique, shapes, lines to create composition, to create a style that was actually uniquely his. Right, so I think when you look at his ink works, they are very distinctive because of that.
You know, when it comes to advice to collectors, it's very difficult because art can be a very emotional and subjective thing. So I think one of the things that we learned along the way is that art in the end is an investment. It is something that you have to treat with love but also with respect. People say, do you buy what you like? I will always answer that I have never bought anything I didn't like, but there are lots of things I like that I didn't buy. So you have to have the story, the focus that we talked about in the beginning must supersede what you like. Also, you must study. You must really know your subject well. If you're going to buy a piece of art, you should know what you're getting. From one extreme, you want to make sure you're not getting a fake, but really from the other extremes, you want to make sure you're getting a piece that in the body of work of that particular artist is meaningful. I find also that two other things. One, most collectors that we know have an easier time buying than they do selling. It's a lot easier to buy. It's a lot harder to sell. It's just like ripping a piece of your soul out. So it's, yes, love your pieces, but don't fall in love with your pieces, because eventually you need to pass them on to whoever is going to come after you that will take care of them. And the last thing I suggest is that you really do think of it as a portfolio. You are buying some pieces of some artists that are already blue chips, like Cheong Soo Pieng, but you may also want to buy some pieces of artists that may or may not happen. So in the end, you can't just see, is every one of the pieces that you buy going to turn into something? You must see it as a whole collection.
It's really helpful to have a focus area, whatever that focus area might be. It could be a particular theme, it could be a particular artist, a particular genre, time and history. And the reason for that is because to really understand whatever that dimension is, you have to put in the time and the effort and the resources to go deep enough to really get the full spectrum. So I would say that that's sort of one of our top tips, perhaps.
My name is Ko Xiao Chuan. I'm 82 years old this year. Besides being a very passionate art collector, my profession is an architect, and I'm a very passionate architect. And in 1967, 68, I was asked by the Minister for Culture at that time, Mr. Yong Yok Lin, to initiate a STEM advisory committee to start the issue of Singapore stamps. The first set of stamps we nominated were Pioneer Artists of Singapore. And we recommended Georgette Chan, Chen Wen-si, Liu Kang, and Cheong Soo Pieng. But Singapore was very poor in the early years. We were really poor. So we couldn't afford to buy artwork. We went to the artists and said, could you donate? All agreed except Cheong Soo Pieng. And he said, I'm an artist, I'm struggling to survive. My wife do not permit me to give away paintings free when we are struggling to feed our family. And that event actually etched in my mind. You know, I've always valued talent and passion and integrity. He has that. He's so focused on his art and nothing else. He's good that he had early support through Lok Wan To, who was his, practically his sponsor. In fact, even the professionals collected his art. This aspect of negative and positive space in his China's ink painting of his last 3 years, after the elaborateness of his Bali paintings of the late 1970s to 1980-81, why in 81 to 83 he created a lot of Chinese ink paintings with negative space. He wanted to explore the limits of the Song Dynasty composition of positiveness and negativeness, and how they coexist to make a painting that you can meditate on. The spiritual. Beyond the visual, spiritual.